you don't even want to see the truth.
We hope you'll find it interesting.
At this point, knowing what we know about race hustling in the media should pose the question, why?
Why? And yet we repeat as parrots, equality, equality, equality.
Why?
Why?
Why? Why do some stories get reported with a racial undertone while others don't? One could say, well, black people are disproportionately targeted by the police. Because the thing that the media, politicians, self-proclaimed activists, and even data won't tell you is that racial motivation is extremely hard to prove.
It might just work, it certainly hasn't been tried yet.
100 frustrating years after the Emancipation Proclamation, the Negro community has arrived at a decision to celebrate this centennial in an all-out effort to achieve full rights now.
You're watching a live national television show that was broadcast in the spring of 1963.
Summer 1966 was a season of revelation for the white man in the North. For the first time, he began fully to comprehend the intensity of his feelings and his fears about the black man.
I feel it's so relevant to issues we face in the United States today. The state of the American Negro. 5 American black leaders. There was Roy Wilkins, the head of the NAACP. There was Whitney Young Jr., the head of the Urban League. There was James Farmer, the head of the Congress on Racial Equality, CORE. There was James Foreman, the head of SNCC, who had been training students in Mississippi to attempt to register voters. I knew young people who were attending these training sessions who went south, and I thought they were heroes.
Mixture of religion and ideology. Here, we have all this artificial's body claiming power. If the power is denied to them, they take it by force. In case of Iran, for example, all of a sudden we have revolutionary committees. What kind of revolution? There was no revolution yet, and yet they had the committees.
And there was the Reverend Martin Luther King, the head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
For years, he had watched, smug and fascinated, as the trials of the Southern black and white were played out for him like some morality play on his television screen. But he remained a spectator, only half involved.
This was scary stuff. The host was Dr. Kenneth Clark, a professor at New York's City University.
I know that the entire country, and certainly the President of the United States and some congressmen, would like to know about the plans for a march on Washington. Mr. Wilkins, would you like to tell us what are the plans as of this date?
The plan is for a huge march to the Lincoln Memorial and a meeting there. On the way, what was described as a brief demonstration at the White House. But we hope to have this an outpouring of expression on the part of the people who wish Congress and the nation to know how they feel, how very deeply they feel about civil rights legislation.
Это ужас, конечно. Ну, то есть смерть, конечно, афроамериканцев это плохо и очень жестко, но в любом случае сейчас типа все афроамериканцы там в многих городах США они грабят магазины там с одеждой, Fight Club, там СНС, вся эта история. Ну, мне кажется, это слишком, типа, что для них сделали частные предприятия, почему бы им не насесть на полицию, там, ту же самую, что-то, какие-нибудь госструктуры.
You don't have to write a polemic. You just have to write a postcard saying, please vote for the Civil Rights Bill.
Да, я считаю, что полицейский неправильно сделал. Я бы на его месте хотя бы откусил горло, чтобы он пытался подышать. Я просто считаю, что мы его должны хотя бы арестовать, посадить в тюрьму пожизненно за то, что он не уважает черных людей. Вот я уважаю, я играю в баскетбол вместе с черными, я их уважаю и считаю, что он неправильно сделал.
If all the evidence you have is a white cop killing a black man, then I would expect every police shooting to be reported in the same way, even if it's in the reverse. Because again, these two factors don't actually prove racial motivation. Aside from that, there's the matter of selective outrage. I believe that this is due in part to the media choosing to race-bait certain stories. Framing a story with a racial undertone is bound to rile some people up, so it's no surprise that there wasn't massive outrage for Tony Timpa or Justine Damon. But Gothics, the reason that there was no outrage with those stories is because the data shows that black people are getting killed at a much higher rate.
I think it's fair to say, wouldn't you say, Martin, that this is no attempt to blackjack anybody? We want to show how we feel.
Exactly. We are not going to Washington to intimidate any congressman or any senator. It will give a large number of people an opportunity to articulate their longings and aspirations for freedom, their desire to see meaningful, forthright civil rights legislation in this session of Congress. And of course, we also intend to arouse the conscience of the nation over the economic plight of the Negro 100 years after emancipation. And I think it can have a great impact. I think it will dramatize the issue. It will have educational value in that it will allow many people to see and understand the continued indignities and injustices which Negroes confront all over the nation.
All over the country, it has captured the imagination of hundreds of thousands of people. Now, we don't know how many of them will be marching to Washington, but a goodly number will. They feel keenly about this, and they want the seat of government. They want the American conscience to know how they feel.
Как-то не подумал, ошибся и, ну, типа, блин, я не думаю, что он это реально специально сделал, типа, он же знает, он полицейский, он знает законы, он знает там все вот это, и вряд ли он специально решает убить человека, тем более чернокожего, он знает, какие последствия будут после этого. Я думаю, чувак просто, как сказать, очень херово оступился, вот, и просто... Случайно это вышло, я думаю, он не хотел, чтобы так произошло.
You're aware that the president has cautioned that he would just as soon have the march postponed or not occur.
Which, I get it. If the entirety of someone's livelihood was built off of exploiting another person's trauma, I can understand the unwillingness of wanting to address the problem. The most damage done to Black Americans is inflicted by those politicians, civil rights leaders, and academics who assert that every problem confronting Blacks is a result of a legacy of slavery and discrimination. That's a vision that guarantees perpetuity for the problems. While we're at it, let's hear what Tom Sowell has to say. Racism is not dead, but it is on life support, kept alive by politicians, race hustlers, and people who get a sense of superiority by denouncing others as racists.
We see this as an all-inclusive demonstration of our belief in the President's program, and since it has been declared to be an orderly demonstration with a rally, at which time I hope to be one of the people who will speak in the interest of the Urban League toward preparing people for the new opportunities. At this level, we will be cooperating.
Stop it. I've already debunked that in another video, so I need you to stop playing devil's advocate for just 1 second and understand that race hustling has been a thing for years, and this topic always gets deflected as anti-Black rhetoric.
I think it's important that the march go off because there is legislation which many people have gone to jail for the substance. That is, the lunch counter demonstrations throughout the South have to be sort of brought to some climax, and it could be done in this public accommodations bill, which is before the Congress. Then, of course, it just left the Delta and a lot of poor people over there, people who make $2.25 a day for 12 hours of work. And so some legislation has to come out of the Congress of the United States to deal with these problems.
Мотивация была у полицейского его просто задержать и отвезти в участок, но он сделал так, чтобы он просто лежал на асфальте и его держали за ногой за шею.
Yes, but now
because of the color of your skin.
Yes, but now he must be taught that this is a sign of his basic insecurity. That for years, as Baldwin put it, he has had a reason, a need to feel superior. Now we must change the norm and get people to understand that it is insecurity that makes you want to take advantage and to hate. That only the secure people now can move toward inclusiveness. It is the more intelligent, the more mature people who want this kind of thing, and only the tragically insecure need today to surround themselves with sameness.
Not only did it produce a predictable reaction in the white community, but it added to the strains within the movement itself. The 5 leading civil rights groups range from the conservative NAACP and the Urban League to CORE and SNCC, by far the most militant. Although they will not criticize each other publicly, leaders of the various groups inevitably are caught up in a popularity contest, and they are acutely aware of the need to present a public posture of militancy.
Gentlemen, I certainly want to thank you for what certainly is the most stimulating and to me quite instructive discussion. I think that America is indeed fortunate to have men of your breadth, your perspective, your sense of responsibility and intelligence as the leaders of probably the most significant social revolution since the 18th century. It certainly is my personal opinion that you 5 men are the contemporary versions of our founding fathers who risked so much and dared so much for freedom and liberty.
Then came summer 1966, and as riots crackled through his cities, the northern white man came to realize the depth of his confusion, his animosity, and fear. Black power was the catalyst, a phrase shouted by a 25-year-old revolutionary on a Mississippi highway. It was a rallying cry to northern blacks mired in frustration and bitterness, a cry that sounded like a threat of violence, of vengeance, to a white man fed up with racial turmoil. The violence struck not just where it was expected, in the humid ghettos of the major urban centers, in Brooklyn, Chicago, Cleveland. Americans were stunned to learn the other unexpected datelines of violence from Amityville, New York, to Menlo Park, California. Almost everywhere it began with marches, demonstrations. Then it escalated to looting, Molotov cocktails, and occasionally to a sniper's bullets. The damage hasn't yet been totaled. It will run into the tens of millions. Arrests were in the thousands. The number of persons injured, unrecorded. At least 9 persons were killed. But the most serious casualty of all was the relationship between the black man and the white man. By summer's end, the northern white was counter-marching, counter-demonstrating. And at the end of summer, white political leaders up and down the nation on all levels were voicing their concern.
Then don't go passing statements of morality saying,
do remember, check out the merch shop, check out the Patreon, hit the Cash App, hit the PayPal.